Previously on Fightland.
Heavyweight champion. My not so little brother. I couldn't have gotten there without you.
Duke has spent his entire season telling himself that revenge is the one thing keeping him focused. He has a target, he has a plan, and he keeps convincing himself that once Kingsley finally pays for what happened to him and his brother, he can walk away and start over. But episode 4 changes everything, because Duke's biggest problem may not be Kingsley anymore. It may be the family he never knew he had. And that final phone call from Joy could completely change the direction of Duke's story. Episode 4 ends with Aiden being taken, while Joy desperately calls Duke and tells him that their son has been kidnapped. At almost the same time, the Russian conflict explodes around the Marshall family, leaving Duke caught between the revenge mission he's been building and the people he actually cares about. That's why I think the next phase of Fightland is going to be much more personal. Duke finally has something to lose. For most of the season, Duke has been operating like someone who has already lost everything. His brother is gone. His boxing career was destroyed. He spent years in prison. And he came home with one goal: revenge against Kingsley. That mindset has made it easier for Duke to take risks. He doesn't seem particularly concerned about what happens to him. But Aiden changes that. If Aiden really is Duke's son, then Duke suddenly has something more important than revenge. He has a child who could be caught in the middle of the war he's helping create. And that's a problem, because Duke may have been willing to put himself in danger. I'm not convinced he'll be willing to do the same thing once Aiden is involved. That could force him to make the one decision he has been avoiding all season: Kingsley or family. Joy has finally had enough. Joy's decision in episode 4 is also important. She asks Duke to leave with her and Aiden. Duke refuses because he still has unfinished business. From Duke's perspective, walking away means Kingsley wins. But Joy sees something different. She sees a man becoming increasingly consumed by a war that could destroy everyone around him. And when Duke refuses to leave, Joy essentially tells him that their relationship is over. Then Aiden gets taken. That timing is not accidental from a storytelling perspective. The show spends the episode showing Duke choosing revenge over a chance at a different life. Then, almost immediately, that different life is threatened. It's almost like the series is forcing Duke to confront the consequences of his decision. But here's where the theory gets interesting. I don't think Aiden's kidnapping is only about hurting Joy. I think Duke is the real target. Think about it. The people around Duke are becoming increasingly aware that he isn't simply another member of the Marshall operation. He's unpredictable. He's getting closer to the family. He's getting back into boxing. He's developing a relationship with Kim. And most importantly, he's operating according to his own agenda. That makes Duke dangerous. If someone wants to control him, they don't necessarily have to threaten Duke directly. They can threaten the person Duke cares about. And now they have exactly that opportunity. Kingsley may use Aiden to control Duke. This is where I think Kingsley could become even more dangerous. We know Duke's entire revenge mission is centered on Kingsley. But Kingsley doesn't necessarily have to fight Duke physically or confront him directly. He can manipulate the situation. If Aiden is genuinely Duke's son, then Kingsley now has leverage over the one person who's been almost impossible to control. Duke can ignore threats against himself. He can't ignore a threat against his family. And that could be Kingsley's biggest advantage. The irony is that Duke has spent the season trying to destroy Kingsley's power. Now, Kingsley may have discovered the one thing that can control Duke. Kim also knows too much. Then there's Kim. Episode 4 confirms that Kim is investigating Duke while simultaneously getting closer to him personally. She suspects Duke's involvement in the violence surrounding the Marshalls, but her feelings toward him appear increasingly complicated. That creates another potential problem. Duke knows Kim is a police officer. Kim knows Duke is hiding something. And now both of them are trying to maintain a relationship while knowing the other person isn't being completely honest. That's not going to end well. But I think Kim could eventually become important to the Aiden storyline. If she realizes Duke isn't simply some criminal looking for revenge, she may begin to understand why he's doing what he's doing. That doesn't mean she'll forgive everything, but she might finally see the difference between Duke and the people he's trying to bring down. Zeek may have created a war he can't control. While Duke is dealing with his family problems, Zeek continues making the larger situation worse. Episode 4 shows the consequences of the casino bombing beginning to spread, while Zeek and Duke go after the Russians despite the uncertainty surrounding who is actually responsible. And that's the problem with Zeek. He wants to prove himself, but he's increasingly making decisions based on emotion rather than strategy. Sabella seems much more aware of how dangerous the situation has become. Zeek, meanwhile, keeps pushing forward. That could eventually create a serious divide inside the Marshall family. And if the family starts turning against itself, Duke may find the perfect opportunity to strike. But there's a catch. The more unstable the marshals become, the more dangerous the environment becomes for everyone around them, including Aiden. The boxing story may actually save Duke. There's another major development in episode 4 that shouldn't be overlooked. Duke is being pushed back toward boxing. Zeek uses footage of Duke fighting Jackhammer to create buzz and potentially set up a fight, and Duke begins thinking seriously about returning to the ring. At first, that seems like another distraction, but I think it could become something much more important. Boxing was Duke's identity before everything fell apart. It was a part of his life that existed before prison, revenge, and Kingsley. If Duke returns to the ring, he could rediscover the person he was before revenge consumed him, and that could eventually force him to question whether destroying Kingsley is actually what he wants anymore. That's why the boxing storyline matters. It's not just about another fight. It's about whether Duke can become himself again. My big theory for episode 5. I think Aiden's kidnapping is going to force Duke into an impossible situation. He'll have to choose between continuing the revenge operation and protecting his family. And I don't think he'll immediately abandon the mission. That's not Duke. Instead, I think he'll try to do both. And that's where things could go wrong. He'll attempt to rescue Aiden while continuing to keep his cover inside the Marshall organization. But every move he makes will bring him closer to being exposed. Kim is already suspicious. Zeek is unpredictable. Sabella is watching everything. Kingsley remains the ultimate target. And now, Duke has a child caught in the middle. The title, Protect Yourself at All Times, suddenly feels much more meaningful. Because Duke has spent years protecting himself through violence, toughness, and emotional distance. But episode 4 asks whether he can protect someone else without destroying himself in the process. And that's the real question going forward. Is Duke still fighting for revenge, or is he finally fighting for Aiden? Because those two missions may not be compatible. And if Duke has to choose, I think we may finally see the man underneath all that anger. That could be the biggest turning point of Fightland Season 1.